Right, everyone, today we've got a special for you. We're chatting to Michael Zappone, Aussie sports broadcaster, general nice guy as well. We're going to chat a little bit about your recent visit to Glasgow, Michael. That was about 3 weeks ago now. Has the body clock sorted itself out yet?
Absolutely, yeah. It was a whirlwind trip. We're only there for 4 nights, and we definitely want to come back. That's one of the takeouts of the trip. But yeah, we wanted to. The reason for the trip was, we broadcast the A League competition in Australia, and we really wanted to show everyone back home just the impact that Ange has had on Celtic and on Scotland football more generally. And despite the fact that we were watching him from afar and we were reading all the articles, the impact when we got there was much bigger than anyone could have imagined back home. The support that the Celtic fans had for Ange and Tommy Rogic, we couldn't believe just how much love there was for the two Aussies in Glasgow.
Yeah, you came over recently to speak to Celtic icons like Ange Postecoglou, Callum McGregor, Hamish Carton as well, of course. But away from the stars, what was the thinking behind it, and how big news is this in Australia? What's happening at Celtic?
Yeah, huge news, but still not bigger news than it was when we first landed in Glasgow. We got to the airport, and the first paper I picked up, it was the night after Celtic had clinched the title. So we had arrived the next morning, and Ange was on the front page alongside a photo of Kate Middleton, and
Right.
and on the back page a photo of the team winning, and a big photo of Ange as well with the headline screaming his name. So whilst it was big news here, it was bigger news in Glasgow. But the reason we wanted to be there was to really highlight just how big an achievement this was for Australian sport, not just for Australian football, but for Australian sport. And I suppose if you haven't been to Australia, it's difficult to understand the landscape in which we operate. Football is a small sport compared to the other codes that we're competing with. And I know that would sound completely foreign to someone watching this who's a football fan in Glasgow, but we have a native football game here called Australian rules football. So if you're from the southern states of Australia, that game is a religion to you, much like football is a religion to people in Europe. And then in the northern states, in New South Wales and Queensland, their religion is rugby league. So they're the two big sports in Australia. And then you have rugby union as well, which is very popular. And then football, our football probably comes a distant fourth. So it really is a crowded landscape. And so we're competing not just for bums on seats, if you like, in the stadium, but we're competing for space in the media. So the football coverage might get one page where the other sports get dozens of pages. So it's a constant battle for us who have grown up and love the game and know how big the game is globally and how important the game is on the global scale. We still feel like we're a minority. So that hence the reason for us wanting to come over there and show just how big Ange has become and Tommy Rogic has become in Scotland, and make Australian sports lovers proud of their achievements.
And what has Ange Postecoglou done for football over the last year since he's come to Glasgow, football in Australia, that is?
I think it's really important to turn back the clock a little bit to understand his journey, because, and I'm sure Celtic fans have read about it, but I've sort of seen it firsthand, because when the A League was started, so the big competition here was the A League, and for football, and the A League started 16 years ago, and at the time Ange was out of a job. He wasn't coaching. He'd sort of started his coaching career at South Melbourne in the old competition, which was called the National Soccer League, and he won two championships there in the early 1990s. And then the National Soccer League disbanded, and there was a couple of years there was no football competition at a professional level here in Australia because they finished the old semi-professional competition and launched this new A-League season. So when the new A-League was launched, we started from scratch, and it started with 8 teams. And Ange had coached in the NSL. He had coached the Australian youth team and had some success there as well. But he wasn't considered good enough to get a job in the new A-League competition. So there were 8 new franchises started. Ange had interviewed for some jobs and didn't get a job. So he was, really struggling at that point in time. So then he started to obviously he was so passionate about the game, took some other jobs and did some TV work, and eventually he was given his opportunity to coach at Brisbane, and his success there. I'm sure you'll be well aware of, and he won championships at Brisbane, and then he took the Melbourne Victory job. With Melbourne Victory is the biggest club in Australia, and he didn't get much time at Melbourne Victory because then there was a sudden change with the national team, and he took on the national team's role. So, and then at the national team, he won the Asian Cup, which is a huge feat. To beat the likes of Japan and South Korea to win that competition was the first time Australia had won the competition. It was hosted by Australia, so that was big news. And perhaps not bigger news that Ange wanted it to be, because he felt like even after we'd won it, we didn't get enough recognition for winning that competition. And then from there, he then embarked on an overseas coaching career and went to Japan. So the journey's been a long one, and he's had to work hard throughout his career to obtain that recognition. And I think one of his biggest frustrations in Australia was that he wasn't getting the sport it wasn't about him. I think it was the sport. The sport wasn't getting the recognition it deserved, and he was constantly fighting battles to ensure football was getting more prominence, getting more television coverage, getting more funding from government. And he was fighting so many battles on so many different fronts. So when I was lucky enough to catch up with him in Glasgow 3 weeks ago, he said to me, it's so satisfying now to see that, what we're doing is appreciated. It's appreciated by the Celtic fans, who are a huge force.
Yeah, I'm sure when you came over, you got a gist of how much we love football in this country. I mean, it's just, I would say the second sport is probably rugby union, and it's like so far off the scale, maybe golf, but football is just, what everyone talks about here. And I think Ange has really just loved that when he's come to the country. How do you find Ange when you're interviewing him? Because he's got a reputation that I'm sure you're well aware of maybe you don't want to ask him a daft question as a reporter because you might get it thrown back in your face. I dare say you've spoken to Ange, quite a lot in your career. How do you find him? Is there always a little bit of trepidation there when you're asking him a question?
Absolutely. You never know where he's going to go, and you're always on your toes with Ange. And there have been many times when he was coaching Brisbane, or when he was coaching Melbourne Victory, or when he was coaching the national team, that he's thrown questions back at me or back at other reporters. And
do you get any shockers that spring to mind right away? Any bad ones that you keep you up late at night?
Not really. No, not really. There was one where I think, Melbourne Victory were knocked out of a finals series where, or they just got through a final. I'm trying to remember. It was at Marvel. They call it Marvel Stadium now. That's a big 50,000 seat stadium where I think Victory had played a final against Perth Glory. And I remember interviewing him after the game, and I might have said something like, you consider yourself lucky to get through tonight because a few things went your way. And he didn't like that line of questioning. And he sort of said, no, well, we weren't lucky. We created so many chances, and we did this and we did that. So yeah, that's one that springs to mind, but nothing that keeps me awake at night. But I think the message is, and the Scottish press, I'm sure, have experienced it, that you need to know your stuff and you need to be on top of your game when you go into a press conference or a one-on-one interview with Ange, and be prepared for anything.
But he would have been in good spirits, wouldn't he, having just won the league, I think, the night before, when you spoke to him a few times, but the first time you spoke to him?
Yeah, we were lucky that and I think he appreciated the fact that, a couple of Aussie journos headed over there to cover the story. and travel a long way to do that, to show everyone back home what was happening. So yeah, he was in great spirits. The league was won at that point, and we went to the training ground and we interviewed him there. And then on match day, we were lucky enough to be pitch side at Celtic Park for that last game of the season. And it was a party. It was a party atmosphere. There was no holding back. And one thing we've learnt with Ange over the years is that there was no way he was going to go into that game and tell his players to just to relax and not try their best on the day. He would have said, yes, go out there and have fun, but let's finish strongly. Let's get to this finish line and burst through it, not limp through it. So, and we certainly saw that. They won 6-0, and it was a great party, great atmosphere at Celtic Park. My first time there, and I've been telling everyone in Australia that you should put it in the diary for September when the Champions League starts, because I reckon you might have a few Aussies over there watching the first few Champions League games at Celtic Park later this year.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. I mean, as Celtic fans, we loved that day. The atmosphere was incredible, getting our hands back on the trophy, seeing Ange with his hands back in the trophy. Ange's speech was just an amazing moment to the full Celtic Park. As an outsider, how was the whole experience? Was it what you expected? Was it more than what you expected?
It was more than what I expected. Yeah, it was more than what I expected. We got there quite early on the day, and we were outside, and we were interviewing Celtic supporters as they were arriving on the day, and then there was the presentation of the trophy, and which was great, and the players arriving and everybody cheering as they were arriving outside Celtic Park, and then of course inside the stadium. Look, I've been to a lot of games in all parts of the world. I've been to World Cups and experienced some great atmospheres, but it'd be tough to top the atmosphere at Celtic Park. And all the ingredients were there. It was a celebration, and Tommy Rogic was being sent off, and Ange was being lauded. But I it'd have to be my top 3 moments of visiting a football stadium in my career. So it was more than I expected. We were sat behind the North Curve we'll sit right behind them where the photographers are seated for the first half, and then we swapped sides and sat down the other end of the ground with the photographers in the second half. So we were really close to the action, and you could hear the players talking to each other. But there were some really special moments in that game. Of course, apart from all the goals and the wonderful action on the pitch, the way that the fans respected the occasion as well is something that was wonderful to experience. So the 18th minute, when Tommy Rogic's number came up in the 18th minute, everyone got up and applauded him, and you could see Tommy, he was taken aback by that. Then, of course, when he was substituted off, he was in tears. So to see that was wonderful. And the speech, we recorded the speech on our camera, and we put that out on Twitter. And the number of retweets and likes and views on that particular video, I've never seen anything like it. So Ange, they were hanging off Ange's every single word, which was brilliant to see. And the roar when he finished his speech and he said, "We never stop," was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. So yeah, it definitely exceeded my expectations.
I actually didn't hear him saying "we never stop" at the end, because I was too busy roaring after he said the bigger, better thing. So that was a welcome surprise for me on the Monday when I rewatched it. That footage is brilliant, and I'll link that below in the description so people can see it, because it's you see the fans in the background, you hear the kind of roar. Emotion in the roar. It's amazing. Just finally, to finish the video on Tom Rogic, a guy that you spoke to after the game, a brilliant servant for Celtic. I know he was saying to you that he's not going to go back to Australia. I think we're still awaiting his next move. What was he like after the game?
Yeah, he was emotional, and I'll turn back the clock a couple of days, because we were at Celtic Park at the training ground when the announcement was made that he was leaving the club, and this would be his last game. And we had requested an interview with Tommy weeks before when we were on our way to Glasgow, and he agreed to do the interview, which was great because he doesn't do many
No.
interviews, as you probably know. And we were sat down with him on the training ground, and afterwards, some of the staff and some of the assistant coaches come up to us and said, "How the hell did you get him to agree to do an interview?"
It's the accent. It's the accent.
They said, "In 9 years that he's been here, we've never seen him speak to any media." So look, we were very lucky to have that opportunity. And I got the sense with Tom that perhaps it was a bit of a relief that he'd made that decision. It was a hard decision for him to make to leave a club that he spent all of his professional career at. He spent a very small amount of time in the A League before coming to Celtic. But that's his whole career, 9 years. He's only 29, so it would have been a really tough decision for him to make. And and when I sort of thought about it after being at Celtic Park, it sort of dawned on me how hard that would have been, a decision. But playing at that level, at that intensity, in front of those crowds every week, or every other week at least, 60 games a year, and now having to play in the Champions League, perhaps he just thought that it was time, that he wasn't prepared for, or his body wasn't prepared, because he has had injuries over the years, and maybe he just thought his body wasn't ready for another year of that level of intensity. But so I got the sense, to answer your question, that he was relieved, perhaps, that his future was out there, and I have no doubt that he'll end up somewhere in Asia, and probably at a league where he's not playing 60 games a year, he's playing half of that. He's probably closer to his family in Australia because he's got his parents in Australia and his brother in Australia, and his brother actually came from Australia for that last game of the season, and he was on the pitch after the game, and I spoke to his brother, and obviously they were all very proud of what he had achieved at Glasgow. So yeah, the love for him was there for all to see, and the love for Ange. We interviewed his wife Georgia a couple of days before the game as well, and just to sort of try and highlight how much the Celtic fans were enamoured by Ange, and she told us a great story where on the last day of training, Ange was on his way home from training ground, and there was some banked up traffic on the motorway, and he was stopped in his car on the motorway, and someone's recognised him. A Celtic fans recognised him, so they jump out of their car on the motorway and knock on his window. And Andrew's on the phone to his wife, and he's like, "Hold on, honey, there's someone here." And he winds down his window, and the Celtic fan jumps over and says, "Do you mind if I grab a photo?" And Andrew's, "Yeah, no problem, mate," and takes a photo and jumps back in his car, and off they go. So I think that probably demonstrated just how much love there is for him, and look, and how Ange embraces it, because other people might have said, "No, go away. We're in the middle of a motorway here." But I think he recognises just how important this club is to so many people, and he said we need to find another word for Celtic supporters, because they're not supporters, they're not fans. It's more than that. It's a way of life. So he understands the how big this is, and don't be surprised, if there's more success to come next year. I know Celtic fans expect success, but beyond the Scottish Premiership, I think it's so exciting that Ange gets an opportunity now to test this team against some of the best in the world, and he'll have no fear in doing that. He'll take the game to Real Madrid or a Liverpool. He won't be playing 10 behind the ball. He'll play the football that you've seen him play this year, and won't change for anyone.
Yeah, just final question, Michael. We've spoken to a few people that know Ange well, Ryan McGowan, Andy Harper as well, Ange's good mate, and they both reckoned that Ange will see European football as where he makes his mark at Celtic. It's nice to have won the league, great season, but European football is where he'll look to make his mark. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I was alluding to that in my previous answer. He'll be so excited by the prospect of facing a big club at Celtic Park, and playing the style of football that we've seen and become familiar with over the years. So, and he rises to those occasions. He won't hold back. He turned that team around very quickly last year, and he's got that year under his belt now. And I'm excited to see what they're capable of next season. Obviously, there'll be some more budget. So one of the battles I'm sure he's having now is to convince the board to spend some more money to bring more players in. To make them really competitive in the Champions League. And he'll be targeting a top 2 finish in his group in the Champions League to get them through to the knockout phase. He won't settle for anything less.
Fascinating, fantastic. We can't wait for it. Are you coming back over? Any plans for Champions League game? Can you justify that?
Certainly planning to. We've already got the dates in the diary. The 6th and the 13th, I think, are the first 2 Champions League dates, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, we'd love to be over there, and we just need to convince our bosses now to send us to the other side of the world again to cover those first 2 Champions League dates.
And I need to do likewise for November for the Sydney Super
Absolutely.
Cup. So we both get a task on our hand. Michael, it's been amazing to chat. Thanks so much for your insight, and all the best.
No, we appreciate it. Thank you, and thanks for chatting to us on Network 10 in Australia. You made the cut. You made the news in Australia. So it was funny because a few people were saying to me, I didn't understand a word they were saying. I had to put. They were being unkind, but it's great. And Ange was fantastic and see all those kangaroos and blow up kangaroos and hats in the crowd was brilliant too.